June 18, 1812. The young United States declared war on the most powerful empire in the world. Most textbooks treat it as a footnote, a minor conflict between America and Britain. But this war was neither minor nor inevitable. It was a collision of systems, ambitions, and miscalculations that would reshape a nation's future. This is the channel where we explore moments in history that changed the world not through single heroes, but through decisions, discipline, and the machinery of states. Stories that unfold slowly, yet with consequences that echo for generations. The War of 1812 isn't just about battles or burned cities. It's about why a fledgling nation survived a war against a global superpower and how close it came to failing entirely. It's about the moments where restraint mattered more than courage and where logistics outweighed valor. The story begins not with muskets, but with the oceans. Britain and France were at war, a conflict that spanned continents. For the United States, neutrality was a policy that demanded more than diplomacy. It required survival. Yet both empires viewed the young republic with suspicion. Britain, engaged in a titanic struggle with Napoleon, still enforced blockades that choked American trade. They impressed American sailors, forcing them into service on British ships. This wasn't mere provocation, it was part of a global system. Britain needed sailors. America had sailors. The collision was inevitable unless diplomacy or deterrence intervened. But there was another layer. The United States had ambitions of expansion. Western lands, Canadian territories, and Native American nations resisting American settlement created pressure for action. The country was young, its institutions fragile, yet its leaders felt the weight of national honor. By 1812, the picture was clear. The US government faced three intertwined problems: British interference with commerce, the threat of native alliances fueled by British support, and the political expectation that the nation would act decisively. Every decision, even in Washington's corridors, mattered because systems trade, supply chains, and alliances dictated the limits of action. The war began with a declaration, yet the first moves revealed the fragility of American planning. The US Army was small, undertrained, and dispersed. Generals debated strategy while state militias were unreliable. Early campaigns into Canada faltered not because of heroism or cowardice, but because logistics failed. Troops lacked proper supplies, maps, and coordination. One of the critical moments came in the Great Lakes. Control of the lakes was not glamorous. It wasn't about battles on a field, but shipbuilding, supply routes, and timing. Commodore Oliver Hazard Perry understood this. His victory at Lake Erie in 1813 didn't rely on individual bravery alone. It was a product of foresight, preparation, and an understanding that naval dominance could shape land campaigns. By securing the lake, the US forced the British to retreat, opening the way for General William Henry Harrison's march at the Battle of the Thames. This wasn't a cinematic charge with a single hero leading men into glory. It was a system at work, ships built in small shipyards, supply lines managed under duress, and leadership disciplined enough to act when opportunity arose. Elsewhere, tension mounted in the capital. In 1814, Britain launched an attack that would test American resilience. Their fleet sailed into Chesapeake Bay, burning the naval yard and then moving on Washington, D.C. Panic gripped the city. President James Madison fled, and the White House was set ablaze. At this moment, restraint and discipline became as vital as courage. Local militias had to decide: engage a superior enemy immediately or delay and consolidate. Some units fell into chaos. Others held strategic positions to protect supply routes and population centers. Decisions were made not for glory, but for survival. In Baltimore, Fort McHenry would become famous, but its true significance was in planning. Cannons placed in exact positions, supplies rationed, and reinforcements timed to counter the British assault. The defense worked not because the Americans were stronger, but because the system was prepared and disciplined. Meanwhile, across the frontier, native nations faced impossible choices, allied with Britain to defend their lands. They fought not for abstract national pride, but for survival. Yet the war's outcome would sideline their interests entirely. Here, the War of 1812 shows that systems and logistics often override courage and loyalty. By late 1814, both sides were exhausted. Napoleon's defeat in Europe freed British resources, allowing them to focus more heavily on North America. Yet the Americans had learned from failures and leveraged their limited resources with precision. The Treaty of Ghent, signed in December 1814, effectively restored borders. There was no decisive conquest, no grand victory parade, but the outcome was still significant. The United States had endured, demonstrating that even a young, decentralized system could survive against the world's dominant power. Battles had been costly, yes, but restraint, preparation, and discipline turned what could have been a national disaster into a story of survival. The War of 1812 shaped American identity in subtle but enduring ways. Politically, it ended the Federalist Party, which had opposed the war, cementing a new national consensus. Militarily, it emphasized the importance of organized supply, disciplined militia, and naval infrastructure, a lesson that would influence future conflicts. Economically, it accelerated industrial self-reliance. Cut off from British imports, American factories expanded, laying the groundwork for the industrial growth of the 19th century. Diplomatically, the war reaffirmed U.S. sovereignty. Britain respected the United States differently afterward, not because of battlefield heroics but because the young nation had endured a test of systems and statecraft. In many ways, the war also redefined America's relationship with its native populations. Alliances forged with Britain dissolved, leaving native nations isolated and vulnerable, a consequence of strategic systems overpowering human alliances. The war left no grand territorial conquests, but it reshaped a nation's sense of self. It showed that survival was not about singular heroism but about the accumulation of disciplined decisions, the careful orchestration of resources, and the patience to act strategically under immense pressure. The War of 1812 is often dismissed as a forgotten war, yet it is a story of systems tested, decisions weighed, and nations measured not by battles alone, but by their capacity to endure. In the end, America did not triumph because it outgunned Britain. It survived because it understood its limits and acted within them. What story from history deserves this kind of careful, cinematic exploration next? Let us know in the comments. If you want more stories of history, systems and decisions, the moments that shape the world, subscribe and join the journey.